It's almost finally here. What's up, I'm Jay LeBlanc, wedding photographer and photography educator. The Canon R5 Mark II is almost finally here. I've been a long-time user of Canon cameras. I've had almost every camera in the 5D series, starting back at the Canon 5D Mark I, II, III, IV, and now the R5. So am I gonna get the R5 Mark II? Probably. Historically, the Canon cameras in the 5 series have gotten updated every 4 to 5 years. And just the other day, some specs got released of what the R5 Mark II might be packing inside of it. And then I'm gonna break them down and give you my opinions of what I would love to see inside of the new R5 Mark II as somebody who uses their R5 Mark I several times a week right now. At the top of our list, we have a 45 megapixel backside illuminated stack sensor, 3.2-inch OLED articulating screen, a new Digic processor, the name is still unknown, no mechanical shutter, max burst of up to 60 frames per second, all new AI autofocus. All right, what does that mean? 8K raw recording, 4K at 120 frames per second, and C-Log 1, 2, and 3. Now starting right off with the sensor, 45 megapixels, yeah, it's the same thing that's in the R5 Mark I already, but we're looking at a backside illuminated stack sensor, which is gonna give us much faster readout speeds for better autofocus and improved rolling shutter. Absolutely love that. That was one thing that I really didn't love about the R5 is the rolling shutter in it is pretty terrible. And I would love to see that improved for video. A new processor is always nice. Being able to have faster readout speeds so you can shoot at those higher burst rates. The removal of the mechanical shutter. It almost seemed inevitable and just a matter of time before Canon went that route as well. New AI autofocus. I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool. It's 2024, right? Put AI in front of anything and people are instantly interested in it. It's kind of how it works. I think the autofocus in the R series cameras right now is pretty good. As far as AI, I don't know exactly what that means. Maybe we're gonna be able to tell it to just track one specific person, or maybe it won't lose objects when they go behind a tree or a wall or something comes between you and the camera. I'm really interested to see further explanation on that one. And maybe we'll get some cool stuff out. Maybe for all you vloggers out there, you could be holding your camera out, and if you wink your right eye, it'll switch autofocus to your friend behind you. And then if you wink your left eye, it'll rack focus back to you. Who knows? The possibilities are endless when you start implementing AI technology into these cameras. Although, I don't actually know too many people who are using an R5 for vlogging, but still, it could be some cool things. Comment below of what crazy AI feature you think could potentially be in this camera. Use your imagination, go wild. Let's hear what you think. 8K RAW is nice to have. I feel like few people are actually using that. I think somebody who needs 8K RAW is probably looking at a cinema camera anyway. So while it's nice to have, I don't think a ton of people are gonna be using it. 4K 120 sounds nice. Everybody loves that buttery, smooth slow motion. Although I see slow motion being used less and less nowadays, but it's still a nice feature to have, right? C-Log 1, 2, and 3, love that. It's just nice having different options when it comes to recording videos. All right, that was my little take on the rumored specs so far. But as somebody who's using this camera on almost a daily basis, here's some of the things that I would like that would make it much easier for me to go out and spend probably close to $4,000 on the newest model. The first and foremost thing, if you own an R5 or an R6 and you are somebody who uses a speed light on your camera, I'm sure you ran into this problem. And that's this damn hot shoe. This thing sucks. I've had to replace it on my R5 and my Mark VI, and I know dozens of photographers personally who have had to replace it as well. This thing needs to be improved. I don't know what it is. Maybe the metal was low grade or the way it was mounted into the body itself, but something about that needs to change. I'm sick of sending these cameras out every year to have to replace this hot shoe. Another really welcome feature would be better in-body image stabilization. Yeah, it's really nice that we finally have the ability to have the stabilization in the body itself, so I can stabilize my prime lenses and older lenses that don't have stabilization, but it's not that good. I would love to see it improved. I know Canon claims that it's up to 5 stops in body, but I don't really feel like I'm getting truly 5 stops. So something a little bit higher than that would be nice. I know this one's rumored, but I would love it if we got that backside illuminated stack sensor. If it's similar to the one that's in the R3, I think it'll be a nice addition to the R5 Mark II. The main reason for me personally, as someone who shoots primarily still photos, is the autofocus in this camera is phenomenal, but sometimes it's not. In lower light situations, it struggles. And I'm shooting on lenses with an f2 or 1.4 aperture, and I still have it struggle once in a while. So if it has the ability to focus faster because of a new sensor, I will buy that camera for that one feature alone. If you're saying, Jay, what the hell is a backside illuminated stacked sensor and all these other words, check out this video right here. Rudy over at Canon does a great job explaining it, much better than I can. It's a short video, watch that, he'll help you understand it much better than I can. As far as the 45 megapixel sensor is concerned, I love it. I think it's like the perfect little sweet spot. The only thing I wish the R5 had was the ability to shoot at a lower megapixel. I don't really need 45 megapixels all the time, especially when I'm shooting a wedding and we're shooting dancing pictures. Nobody's gonna take a picture of somebody dancing and blow it up super huge. If I could bring this down to like 24, that'd be fantastic. Just like the 5D Mark IV had, where you could shoot at a smaller raw size, I really wish that this camera had that, because I really don't want these massive files for every single picture that I take all the time. And on the other end of the spectrum, I know some people want an even higher megapixel sensor than 45, such as a 60 that was possibly rumored, or even 100 megapixel. I think it'd be really cool if Canon did what they did with the 5D Mark IV, or what Sony's doing with the A7 series, and making a higher resolution version of it that would be better for where you need those higher resolution files. When I'm shooting a wedding, I don't really need something bigger than 45 megapixels. Most of the time I could get by with just 24. So having the ability to turn down the resolution when I don't need it, or having another body that was an even higher resolution for the people who want that, would be a nice option to have. Big feature that the R3 has that I really want to see in the R5 Mark II is the eye autofocus. And I'm not talking about the camera tracking somebody else's eye. I'm talking about the camera tracking your eye. If you haven't seen this already, go search YouTube, you'll find the video on it. Basically, right here in the viewfinder, there's a little sensor that looks at your eyeball, and it'll move the autofocus point to where you're looking. So if you're looking over at the right side of the screen, it'll move the autofocus point to the right side. And if you're looking to the left, it'll move the autofocus point to the left. So without even touching anything, it just looks at your eye and focuses where your eye's looking. And then when it comes to the video side of things, there's only a couple features that I feel like, as a primarily still shooter, I would like to see added to the video features. And the very first one, if you were following the R5 Mark I when it first got released, it got so much hate for this, and that was all the overheating issues. Yeah, Canon did some upgrades to the firmware that allowed longer record times, but I would love it if I could just record for an unlimited time. Now, I'm not an engineer or anything, but maybe the fact that they're taking the mechanical shutter out of there, there's more room for air circulation to cooling off the sensor for longer record times, or some other little design factor that they can do to this that'll allow for unlimited record times. Now, I might get some hate for this, but personally, I wouldn't mind if they made the camera body a little bit bigger if it meant no overheating issues. And continuing with the video, I would love it if we reduced the rolling shutter, because the rolling shutter in this camera is pretty awful. I think having that new sensor that's rumored will help it, and hopefully it helps it a lot, but we won't even really know how well the rolling shutter is improved until we get hands-on. Of course, when Canon announces it, they're gonna say this camera is drastically improved, but in real world use, I'm gonna love to see how much better it actually gets. And a couple other little things that would be nice to have, but it's not a total deal breaker. The first one's going to be the battery life. I know Canon came out with these new improved batteries. Now, I love the fact that I can still use a battery that I've had for the last 10, 12 years inside of this camera. But even with the newest and greatest updated batteries that were meant for these mirrorless cameras, I still wish the battery life was improved, especially when it comes to recording video. The battery in these things they're okay. And now, if we're gonna stay with that same form factor, there's only so much we can do. It'll probably come down to software and the way the camera handles power and the amount of power that's required. So if there's any way of possibly improving the battery life, even if I could get an extra 100 pictures on the battery, I would consider that a huge win. The last thing that would be nice to have, but it's not directly related to this camera body, is updating the Canon Connect app. I don't know if any of you have ever used that app, but it is terrible. It only works like half of the time. The other half of the time, it just will never end up connecting to my phone or my iPad. And when it does connect, it's not all that pretty or easy to use. I wish they would do something about that app because it seems like it hasn't changed in the last like 7 years. Now, I know people have a long list of things they would like to see in this camera, but Canon has to find a middle ground here. They can't shoot themselves in the foot and hurt the sales of other cameras that they currently sell. But they also got to give you enough reason to want to buy it and not just stick with the camera that you already have. If you look through any Facebook groups or forums online, you're going to see people wishing for the moon. You're going to see people wishing for things that only come in a $20,000 camera. Now, is that realistic in the Canon R5 series at a reasonable price? Probably not, but we're going to have to compromise a little bit here. The rumored updates to the R5 already seem pretty good, enough to make me want to buy it. It seems like with technology nowadays, and not just camera technology, all technology, people are wanting updates and they're wanting them now. So companies are almost forced to rush things to market, and I'm glad that Canon doesn't necessarily do that. They take their time with developing these cameras. Even if they hold it off for an extra 6 months just to make something perfect, I'd much rather have that than buy a camera that has flaws and then 2 years later they just release a new camera instead of addressing the issues. But then you have these companies that do rush out new product, and then you have everybody complaining about there's not really a difference between the last model and the new model. There's no making everyone happy when it comes to releasing new technology, so you're gonna have to figure out what's best for you. The rate at which technology is evolving nowadays it's slowing down. Let's just be honest. We complain a lot, but in reality, these companies are doing a pretty good job at trying to implement new things that consumers want. As somebody who makes a full-time living off of their camera and uses it multiple times a week, I can absolutely see myself getting the newest model. If it brings in features that'll make my job easier or allow me to spend less time on doing something or get shots that I wouldn't necessarily have gotten on an older camera, I'll gladly pay for those updates. But for somebody who's a hobbyist or only shoots a couple jobs a year, older cameras still do a great job. I would honestly buy this camera again if they told me the R5 Mark II wasn't coming out for another 10 years. Even older DSLRs are still producing phenomenal pictures. If you're looking at this as just a stills camera, a DSLR will do a great job for you. The newer mirrorless cameras, they're nice to have. There's some cool features in them, but are they producing a drastically different image than, let's say, a 5D Mark IV? Not really. Especially depending on the type of photography you're doing, it's not a necessity, it's just nice to have. So go ahead, comment below. Let me know what's on your wish list for the Canon R5 Mark II, and if you think that you'd be picking one up when it finally gets released. And until the next video, peace!